We can go now, if that's okay with you. All right. So good morning to our colleagues in the Americas region, afternoon to our colleagues in Europe, Africa, and Middle East, and evening to our friends from the Asia Pacific who dialed in a very late time from homes. I've seen a few names coming from Asia Pacific. My name is Ismail Bidani, learning and capacity building expert here at IOM. Welcome to IOM Learn on Air, broadcasted live from our staff development and learning small studio here in Geneva. For those who have been following this monthly Learn on Air broadcast in our SDL YouTube learning channel, will recall that we started this video learning concept about 10 months ago with the objective to reach out to our colleagues from all parts of the world, in hardship emergency countries, and here in headquarters, the different regional offices, with some hopefully new learning on either the sector of migration or in general management and leadership issues like we will cover today. Today, just to share with you, we have reached to about 4,000 colleagues using this learning tool free of charge. And we will continue to try to innovate the way we deliver learning to ensure really that no colleague is left behind without learning. Today, we will speak about one of the most pressing issues we face on our daily life and at work and outside. It is how do we lead and how do we develop our leadership capabilities in general. And with us to cover this topic is a very good friend, a mentor, and a professor I learned from 10 years ago. And I'm fortunate to have him here today, Professor Geneva Mercier, who has a diverse background that started in industry before transitioning to the academic world. He had several HR roles in German companies and others. He is now a professor of leadership and change management at the MBA program, where he also heads the personal development program at the Geneva School of Economics and Management, part of the University of Geneva in Switzerland. And with his keen view to bridge between the academic and industry worlds, Professor Mercier started the Self-Leadership Lab to work with companies from around the world in leadership development. Most recently, he created a Self-Leadership Foundation with the objective to bridge with the social sector and use self-leadership with the various vulnerable groups of our society, people we at IOM deal with a lot, people with diseases, refugees, and other type of mental health. Professor Geneva, I call you Geneva, I don't call you maybe Mercier if you allow me. Welcome to IOM, and a pleasure for me to reconnect and have you as part of the IOM Learn on Air.
Thank you, Ismail. Hello, and hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and to share these ideas and these experiences with you. So I let you try, Ismail.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of reminders maybe before we start this very, as you know the format by now, very interactive question and answer with Professor Geneva on the subject of self-leadership. Before doing that, I would just remind you to post any question they may have on the chat room that we have there. I already see people from Chile and other places in the world. So fantastic to have you all there from Panama. So thank you for your messages. So yes, you can post your question on that chat room during the stream, and we will try to answer them at the end of the session. Or you could send it to me if there's something specific. You can send it to me by email. I have my mobile here watching it just to see if someone's sending a message for us to follow up and look at more concretely. Very good. So maybe the first part of this discussion, Professor Geneva, is about when the word leadership, at least from my observation, or leadership development is brought in a discussion, it is often meaning different things for different people. So from your extensive research and professional work, what are the key school of thinking when it comes to leadership development?
Okay, you know, professors love to create categories, so I could answer how these different styles of schools and so on. But if I want to focus to help all of you to understand, I think we currently have two main big schools. One school is the one which is popular in big companies. You know, big companies like Nestle, PepsiCo, Philip Morris, whatever, and Ernst & Young, all these big companies. They are developing leaders so that these leaders are able to reach the goal set by the company. And it means that the company is big enough to structure the markets so that the company is sure that the goals will last long enough. So if you know that you have these goals for in 5 years, then you develop leaders, and it means that you create trainings and team building, and then you put a lot of leaders in this training so that they develop competencies to answer the requirement of the companies and the standards of the company. You have standards, and you want the leaders to follow these standards because you know what you need to reach your target on the market. Okay, if you look in the newspaper, we're always talking of these companies and also Facebook and the new ones like the GAFAs, and because these are big enough for us to talk about them. But in the reality, in your everyday life, there are much more SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, NGOs like yours, or administration. And these type of organizations are completely different. They can influence the market, but they can structure the market. I'm sure that all of you, where you are, all around the world, you try to influence your reality, but you know that you don't master the reality around yourself. So what does it mean? It means that these organizations are facing complexity and are needing to adapt themselves, an adaptation to any change in the environment. Who could have forecasted that someone as Trump would come in the USA, for example, and create a new movement for international relationship? No. So if you have to adapt, you can't develop people and develop leaders for specific behaviors and specific competencies. You have to develop themselves to be ready for the change and to be ready to adapt to any change coming. So it means that you have to develop not their competencies, but their potential. So that's for all of these organizations, developing potential is much more important. So it's not training, it's much more coaching. We will talk about that later on. And in that sense, in big companies, if you train people, it's to promote themselves and help them to have bigger jobs. In these organizations that are confronted to complexity, development is not only for promoting people. If you're promoted, it's much more, it's a consequence. But for a lot of you, reaching a higher level in organization is not your goal. For some of you, it's much more the dedication to the cause you're facing. For some of you, it's perhaps the challenge or specific project. So it means also for the companies developing leaders in this sense of facing complexity and developing their potential, there are a lot of types of developments and not only hierarchical promotion.
That's right, and I think this is a clear way of not categorizing, but at least giving it a real context, because we do have different type of leaders within IOM, one that are working at the program global level here in Switzerland or regional offices, different thematic areas, missions who are working in with different operational aspects. So it makes a lot of sense what you describe in terms of how this leadership and leadership development can fit different categories and different groups.
Yeah, for sure. If you take big companies, it's top down. You set the goals, you define the competencies you need, and then you train people to be able to follow and to reach and develop these competencies. So it means top down. So you really need to focus on top management and middle management, because it's the people who will then lead others. In companies like smaller companies, but also organizations like yours, IOM, when you are somewhere in Chile, somewhere in Bangladesh, okay, you have to face the problems. You don't need and you don't have to wait that someone in Geneva answer the problem for you and define what you have to do. You have to face the problem. You have to solve the situation. So it means that in these cases, the leadership development is not only for top managers. Top managers have to develop themselves too. They are facing a huge complexity. for giving the mission, orienting the whole organization, and so on. But you are on the field also facing a huge complexity. It's not the organizational complexity, but it's the operational complexity. And so you have to develop your leadership too. So it means also a real difference in the target. For big companies, it's much more top, middle, and young manager. And for organization like administration, your organization, SMEs, it's much more dispatched in the whole organization. You all need some leadership because you can't wait for the answer from someone else before to face the situation you're facing.
And actually, this makes me think about the follow-up to this question, which is, if we're to think about leadership development, and reality is within IOM or other organizations we have worked with, is that it's seen somehow as almost as an exclusive entitlement to a certain segment of the organization, to be direct, senior team mostly, but most of the 11,000 employees of IOM are actually not at that senior level. They do a lot of interesting and important and high impact work at the ground on the field, but they're not at that level. So, what is? I mean, the theme of the session today is about self-leadership, and I'm curious to know from your experience, what is actually self-leadership, and how do you see it applied to IOM context, the stuff that we discussed about?
Okay. Yeah. So self-leadership is really not for the big companies, but really for organizations facing complexity. So SMEs, administration, NGOs, and so on. In these organizations, no one will take your career in charge. No one will take your development in charge, and no one will give you any answer or later on, and too much later on most of the time. So it's more or less do it yourself. Do it yourself. So on which basis? On which basis, knowing that you have all your experience, on your knowledge, but you don't have the security of a huge organization influencing the market and so on. So on which basis? And the only security you have is yourself. So, or the main security. You can, a bit, I hope for you, count on IOM, but at least the main security you have is yourself. And if you just count on your experience and the years you have developing experiences and projects and so on, you just repeat what you know. So you need to develop your self-leadership. It means developing your ability to define your goals, to define how you can fulfill your role, but also how you can fulfill yourself, self-fulfillment. We see now that the world is so difficult and that our missions are so difficult. The mixing between our professional and personal challenges is so difficult that if you don't satisfy yourself also, and not only the company, then you won't have the energy to do it on the long term. So the main goal facing complexity is to try to do things that are good for the company, the organization, your beneficiaries, and for you. Really the three stakeholders, taking you really into account, because it will give you the energy and the strength also to fulfill your role toward the migrants, the beneficiaries, and toward the organization. So self-leadership is really important in that sense. So what does it mean to set a goal for you? In the US way of defining that, if I take professors like Blanchard or Bryant, they say, define a goal, and then self-leadership is how to reach a goal. But I disagree with that. I just tell you because you could perhaps, some of you follow this way of thinking. But I disagree with that because if you do that, you do like a big company. You're assuming that you can fix a long-term goal for yourself and that this goal will be valid along the years. You don't know what will happen around yourself, and you will also change yourself at the age you have, in your family, and so on. So the idea of self-leadership that we have developed in Geneva and in Europe is much more based on work on yourself to identify your values, your assets, to identify your strengths, and also to identify your inner dreams. And based on that, let your inner intimate wishes and goals rise. So the idea is really to take all hidden dogmas that we have from education, from all the past away, not to lose that because we need the past in the experience, but to take them away. Why? To reconsider them and to really see, okay, what's you in that? What's really you, and what is your real added value for the others as well as for you? So in that sense, self-leadership is really taking the driver's seat, accepting that somehow you have to take the driver's seat in your life, professional life and for sure personal life, even if there is a company or an organization giving you some guidelines. But on the field, every day, you have to take the driver's seat. And doing that in a way that you use your full deck of assets. Because if you do that, you develop yourself, you satisfy yourself, and it gives you the energy for facing the difficult times from the outside. That said, also, it means that self-leadership it's a kind of work-life balance, it mixes professional and personal aspects. We play roles, for sure. When we are at work, we're not exactly the same as we are at home or with friends or whatever. But these roles are just way of playing. If you take, I don't know, a big actor, for example, I say, I don't know, Steve McQueen and Marlon Brando, for taking old actors. If you give them the same role in a film, they won't play it the same way. So it's really important for that to understand. Having a role in an organization is not just a fixed role. So you play it your way. And self-leadership integrates that. It means you have your personal way of playing a role, and it means also that your values, your inner values, are still here at work. You can't have different values at work that you have in your personal life if you want to have the whole energy that you need to face complexity, problems, troubleshooting, challenges, and so on. So and you said, okay, IOM. So I think if you consider that for IOM, I mean, let's take perhaps headquarter and the field. I think it's in the headquarter. I've had the chance to work in headquarters and in the field, in the organization I've been working for before to be at the university again. So I see that in the headquarter, you have to prepare, you have to think, you have to give the tools so that the field can act and can produce added value for the beneficiaries. So self-leadership here is much more oriented for the people working at headquarters to understand what difference do they want to bring so that they not just only follow mechanism, processes, politics, which are not useful for the field. What is useful for the field is the support you give through these processes and so on. So the idea is really, what do I want to bring as added value that is good for me, that is not only repeating what the other have done, where I develop myself, and that will produce some real support for our people in the field. And for people in the field, you're much more under pressure on an everyday basis. It means the pressure from the outside, from the migration, from the politicians in the different countries you're in, from perhaps stakeholders like citizens disagreeing with what you do or whatever. So you could be like a punching ball under all these the things. So self-leadership is really relying on your values. What is important for you? Confronting that and knowing that, what do you need to do and how do you need to act for you to find your mission and your real reason of acting toward that. So I don't know if it's
It is. Can you? There was also, if I recall correctly, Professor Geneva, you wanted to share that a theory image with the colleagues for them to have a quick look on how it is done. Do you want me to share that screen at this point?
Because self-leadership. Okay, I gave the aim of self-leadership. Okay, so to develop yourself, taking the driver's seat and discovering your inner need for development and for contributing to the world. But then the question is, okay, what's different? How do you do that? And I just want to focus on some theories, if I could into brackets, that are behind self-leadership and which can show you that it's different than classical leadership development. The first one, before to come to the one you were mentioning, the first one is cross-fertilization. It means if you want to develop yourself, you have to go out of a closed world. We're all having some circles of friends, of colleagues, and so on. And after a while, we're always developing mindsets, and we are much more comfortable in this mindset, and we have the tendency to stay in this mindset. That's cool. We need it. We need sometimes just to be with friends at ease and so on. But we don't learn any more from that after a time. So cross-fertilization means that if you want to develop your self-leadership, you have to be confronted to a lot of other inputs, a lot of other people, a lot of other perspectives. The goal is not for you to change your way of thinking, but to consider others so that you can learn from that and enrich your own way of being through other perspectives. So cross-fertilization is really important. It's not bringing you an answer, but confronting you to a lot of answers so that then you can develop yours. Then the second point you can show now, Ismail, the farmer's model, it's not something you can do in one time. You can't just go and follow a training about self-leadership and then you go out and it's cool, then you have developed your self-leadership and you know who you are and so on. You have to go through several steps. It's a kind of journey. We always call that a journey, you know, a journey, several steps. And we follow, for example, this famous theory from Otto Scharmer, and the U theory. You can find a lot of books and articles from Otto Scharmer. He's a professor at the MIT in Boston. So he's saying, okay, first we have to co-initiate between the environment and us. Why do we need to change? So there is a kind of common intent. At one moment, you feel that you have the need to change, to develop, to evolve. But it's not only you, it's also because the environment has changed. So there is a kind of finding what has changed in the relationship between the environment and you, and not only in you or in the environment. Then it's observing. You can't learn something without coming out from a specific reality, which is your reality. So in self-leadership, the goal is really to observe what you do, and to also receive the feedback from others about what you do. You know, I don't know you, but when I was in a management position, I only had the mirror every morning to tell myself, did I right or did I wrong the day before? Most of the time we're quite alone. We have to face the kind of solitude, and it's not easy. When you develop self-leadership, it's really important to face others and to get feedback from others. That can be organized for sure for groups. And then you see the third step, co-inspiring. It means then from that, you won't receive any answer from the outside so about what's your drive and what's important for you. You have to be inspired and to intuitively find what's important for you when you observe your reality throughout the environment. And then co-creating, it means that once you have found that, it's still a kind of intuition, but it's not a reality, it's not practical. We have intuitions, but intuitions are not sufficient to be put in practice. So then we just have to test, try, to accept that we can't succeed in 1 week or in one time to develop new ways of working, of interacting with others, and so on. So it's really trying, co-creating, prototype the new through several tests, and then we can evolve with our environment and do something. So it's really a kind of journey, and it means for example, the self-leadership module that we have at the University of Geneva lasts between 6 and 7 months. You work about 40, 50 hours all along these 7 months, so you don't work only on that, but you have several steps so that you can really iterate the learning and follow the journey. And then I would say, and we come about that, I think, is right after that, then coaching is really important too. Because if you want to evolve, you can't just follow your own thinking, but you need to be coached.
Thank you very much, Professor Geneve. I think I have been privileged to undergo the self-leadership program as a participant, and then after contributing to some of the delivery. And I can tell you from my reflection, being an IOMer now, is that it is a very unique perspective thinking. It's really making you the owner of how you should grow, you should develop. It's not about, which I have seen in many organizations in the past, the idea of leadership development is trying to become someone else.
Yep.
Trying to become the best, like a best CEO you have seen or heard about. Self-leadership is about really, like Professor Geneve said, about being the best version of yourself. If I put it this way.
And the best version of yourself in your current world. It means you can make development seminars about with I don't know Zen or Reiki or whatever. Or you could wish to be a writer once or a storyteller or whatever. No, the idea of self leadership is be the best version of yourself in your real current life. That's really it's not dreaming of something else. It's really be the best version of yourself in your current life or in a life that you can change and that you can reach, not in a dreaming life. So it's really not the best version of yourself interacting with your environment. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know it's interesting you mentioned that because one of our colleague Alexis asked this question about the difference between general leadership and self leadership, and I think that they found what we just talked about now answering that. So I hope that resonates with the rest as well. There is a mindset on how you develop as a general development programs and training we see versus looking at yourself from inside.
Yeah.
What trigger you, ticks you, what makes you happy or not, what makes you engaged and motivated in life, and based on that you build like Professor Geneve based on the reality of the surroundings and create the pathway for the future. So that's quite interesting.
I think a lot of you all, or most of yourself, have had several managers all along your career. And if you look at these managers you've had, they have several styles. There is no one good type of manager. There are a lot of good managers and a lot of bad managers. But what makes the difference? A good manager is someone who accepts himself and plays his assets, plays with his strengths, and doesn't try to be someone else. And I think that's one other difference between leadership and self-leadership. Leadership, you focus on leading others. And so you try to learn tools to better lead others. Self-leadership, you go from the point that in the uncertainty, in the complexity, if you want that other trust you, you'd better first lead yourself. It doesn't mean that you're selfish. It doesn't mean that you forget the other one. But you lead yourself. It means that you know how to confront this uncertainty because you identify your values, your drives, your strengths, and you follow them and you use them, you accept them. You also accept your weaknesses and the rest. And so then you have all the inner stability to lead others or to help your beneficiaries.
Absolutely, and it's. I know this is an important question, and that's where people start to distinguish between the two. I think even if we look at people who we traditionally see in the book of leadership development or in a training in a leadership development, I remember I used to join leadership development program where, for example, Dr. Luther King was always featured as a leadership figure that you would want to become like or something of that nature. At that time, the focus was how can we become him, and I think it wasn't bad. However, I mean maybe some people related to him, some others may not. So it was really a miss and hit situation. But when I started to know self leadership through Professor Geneve, I think what I discovered is that even Dr. Martin Luther King, if you look at his journey, and for those people who've gone through his biography and how he started, actually he went through self leadership himself.
Yeah.
He's gone through that journey of trying to identify why am I here, what is exactly happening around me, and how can I help myself first and then the group I am with. And that's how the movement started. Then people like Professor Geneve mentioned, people started to trust him, believe him, because he was genuine, authentic, not trying to become someone else. And that's how the whole movement started to bring it to that example.
I think exactly. So what's important in Martin Luther King is not the charisma. Okay, there is charisma for sure, and it helped him to reach his goals. But for us as leaders or manager in our everyday life, it's not his charisma. It's the way that he had the self-leadership. He was corresponding to himself. But you don't need to be him. I just take an example. I got a friend. It's a friend. He's shy. He's really a shy guy. He loves to work and to help others. He takes care of others, but he's really shy. And this guy, he first began his career in sailing. Okay, so being alone on the boat, so it's okay, not interacting with others. But then he received, as a present, when his father was old, he received a company his father has created, which is in the glass industry. So suddenly he had a company to lead. And he developed the company tremendously. So I was asking him, I said, "Guy, you absolutely have, sorry, I love you, but you have no charisma." You have no charisma. And you're not someone being able to lead others as we all imagine that it should be. So how do you do? He said, "Yeah, but I always been taking care of others. And talking with people face to face, that are the moments I'm not shy. Talking to 3, 4, 10, I am shy, but not." So what did I do? I focused on choosing the right person for leading the several units of the department. I'm not trying to show me. They show themselves for their unit, and I give them my time, my support to hear them, listen to them, to accept failures, challenge them, but also that they feel that I trust them. And so I developed the company. So it's interesting because he accepted himself to be shy and to be unable to be in front of all employees saying, okay, the mission, the vision is that. No, he said, okay, what I'm able to do is to take care of people and support them. And he integrated that in his leadership, and he was able then to develop the company. So that's really that. Martin Luther King is interesting not for the charisma for all of us, but for having accepted who he is and using that for contributing to the environment and to the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, if I may jump into now that we, thanks to you, understood what is the essence of self-leadership and how it differs from traditional leadership development. Now we'll talk a little bit about the how part.
Mm-hmm.
How can we develop our self-leadership? I mean, coaching, and you made a little reference to it, is becoming a norm within learning and development in general. I mean, it's kind of taking over a little bit from traditional online classroom setting, and a lot of the coaching session focuses on self-reflection. So, from your experience, do you see a link between coaching and self-leadership, and why coaching is what it is now?
Okay, yeah, coaching is not a fashion; it's a trend for sure. But why coaching? Okay, let's come back. Complexity. So facing complexity, no one knows what the answer will be. So there is no standardized learning. So you have to help people to develop their potential to be ready for the future, whatever it will be. So how do you develop the potential? It's not in training. It's helping people to identify it. So how do you do that? First, you put them into the reality. You lead projects. You face crises. You have people to lead. You have people to help, and so on. So you're facing several types of reality. And then from all of that, you gain questions, you gain experiences. And how do you do, not just to run from one meeting to the other, from one crisis to the other, from one requirements to the other? It's only if you take time to reflect on it. You can reflect in the evening, being alone on your sofa and having a beer or whatever, and say, okay, what did I do? It's cool, but it's a first step, but you're just always turning in your known set of mindsets and of opinions. So the coaching is just a help to integrate all the learnings you do on an everyday basis, facing project crisis and so on. Coaching is that it's helping you to find how do you answer to this situation, how do you the best answer to this situation in a way that you feel at ease. There are situations where you feel, okay, cool, I did it today, I really helped. And there are a lot of other situations where you feel frustrated, you say, I would have liked to do that and that. So how to learn from that? It's only having people who can take time with you and reflect with you so that you can ask you questions and that you can find your own answer or your own best practices. So coaching is not a fashion, it's a trend, because it's the only way to integrate the whole complexity of everyday life and to learn from that. Otherwise, we're just dumped and knocking our heads from one door to the other. So coaching is really important in that. But then coaching itself as a word, you have heard a lot about coaching. In any sport team as a coach, for example, that's not the same. Performance coaching, like in sport, is not the same as development coaching. Performance coaching is helping, for example, a Usain Bolt to win the 100 meters at the Olympic Games. Okay, he has all the talent for that, but he needed a mentor. He needed a coach to help him to develop the natural talents he had to reach his goal. Okay, that's performance coaching because the goal is set and the goal is known. Development coaching is much more helping you to develop your goals and not following or reaching a goal. So it's developing your goals, and that's what you do and or what we do in self-leadership. But then in self-leadership, we use collective coaching. That's really interesting and different. I'm sure that some of you have a coach, face-to-face coaching, and he asks some questions, he helps you to develop your answer and so on. Okay. But then in self-leadership, you lose the collective coaching, because in the collective coaching, the aim of the coach is not, there is a coach, but is not to ask all of the people to answer some questions and so on, is to help the group to question itself. If you have teammates who also are, for example, working at the IOM, they're facing some of the same situation as you face, but their answer is different. So they will ask you, why do you do that? Me, in my situation, I do that. Yeah, okay, I understand. And so you will, through this questioning and this multilateral feedback, you will better understand your unique way of answering to things. So that's really a trick in self-leadership, to have multi-dimensional learning and to be confronted in a lot of feedback. And the coach will help you to learn from this feedback, but he will also lead the group to give you feedback. The collective coaching is becoming also a trend, not only on individual coaching, because you learn from several people, and you have also a feeling of your difference and a trust in your difference toward the other. That said, it's really interesting too, because through this trend, it means that organizations don't have to pay coaches all over the world to coach people. You can just have internal coaches. I don't know how it is at IOM, but personally, I never believed in the manager as the direct coach of his employee. Because if you want to develop someone, if you have in your head, I have this target to reach, and I want to follow this goal, you can't help the other one to develop only his potential. You will help him to follow the performance. But if you do a group, and it's through this group you help people to learn from themselves, then you can be the manager of the group. It's just creating the conditions for the people learning from each other. And if you take beneficiaries or migrants, for example, one day you could say, okay, it could be interesting if we want to develop, also help people to have leadership, and so that the migrants are not just sheep, and that's really leadership and people that help the organization and so on, then you will have to take groups. And so it means you could, as managers on the field, be coaches for them too. So for me, coaching.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was about to say that it is really interesting how you linked it to both of the organization and the work of people with the external stakeholders, especially the beneficiaries we work with. How you could encourage them to self lead and self reflect, so they can have better futures in general. And I guess this links to the self leadership foundation that you have created. Is about about also that part, no?
Yes, because I see three main results from self-leadership. We have led a study 2 years ago, because after 10 years of and about 2,000 people having followed our self-leadership program, I wish to know what are the long-term outcomes, not only the satisfaction at the end of training, of a coaching journey, but also the long-term outcomes. First, at the end of the self-leadership program, people develop 3 scenarios, because you can't just follow one goal, as we say. And 92% of these people have implemented one of these scenarios after 18 months. So that's one learning. The second learning is that the learning groups that we create through the self-leadership modules, 60% of them continue. Because people have learned to grow through the feedback of colleagues, and they need these colleagues to, to, to be able to listen, to hear, and to give feedback when they face a difficulty 2 months, 1 year after. So 60% of the groups continue without the coaching to meet sometimes and to help each other. And third, all, or not all, but a lot of the beneficiaries of self-leadership journey have used some of the tool for their environment. It means for the family sometimes, or for their employees, or like in this case for you, for why not for migrants. So there are tools you would see if you want to follow that. There's a lot of tools that help you to better understand who you are and to better shape your future and influence your environment. And so once you've that into your hand, you just can use them. That's open source tools. You can use them and use them for your environment. And it means that you begin to coach your environment as you were coached, because you know what you have learned from the journey, and intuitively or more concretely, you then also able to coach others.
And this distinction between, which I really take good note of, a lot of people don't see the difference between a performance coach, a development coach, and I'm looking at the notes here, and the group coaching or the collective coaching. And I think this is extremely important to see the differences and how self leadership fits really the group coaching concept. And I could see that because a lot of the IOM colleagues also learn and benefit from each other experiences in the different countries and regions, and so how coaching can be, simulated in a collective environment as a community, as opposed to one to one. That's an interesting concept in coaching. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think because you don't need to have all the weight on your shoulder to be sure to ask the right question. If you're not a professional coach, but you're in a situation of facing crisis or dealing with complexity, helping people, then you have sometimes to help them to be responsible, to help them to find the answer, so that you don't have to always find yourself the answer. So if you want to coach them, it means helping them to take initiative and helping them to take the responsibility. And I'm sure that in a lot of cases you're facing, you need some of the people in front of you to take responsibility. When you're sometimes one of the migrants within a group who takes a responsibility, it must probably be much easier for you than to lead, to try to find solution and so on. So coaching is helping people to develop initiative and responsibility. And then group coaching and collective coaching is just the way for non-professional coaches like you are, most of you, and I am not a professional coach, I'm just a professor. It's not the same thing. So, and so it means for all of us, it helps us to have people giving feedback to each other, and so that they are coached by a lot of colleagues, or 5, 6 colleagues, or whatever. So that's really the trick within group coaching. You can coach people without to be a professional coach. You just take them together and you help them to ask them questions mutually, so that they learn from each other, but also that the leaders among each other arise from that.
This is great, and it requires some facilitation skills, but it's less difficult than coaching skills for sure. I think the linkage to this is, if you've spoken about how it could be applied to IOM, which is a great linkage to our reality. But what are the other experiences, Professor Geneve, that you have seen with other organizations here in Switzerland and worldwide that can draw some inspiration from what you've done so far?
Okay, let's take 2 examples, perhaps. I think that could be interesting for you. Okay, first example in Switzerland. We come from Switzerland, so if you agree, I begin in Switzerland. And I will talk about Vacheron Constantin. Vacheron Constantin is one of the famous brands in the watch industry. So it's the watch that most of us were never being able to buy. So, but even though they are really expensive, Vacheron Constantin has had a big growth from 20% during 10 years in the last 10 years. And no more since 2 years because of the Chinese market have tremendously changed. But it means that it was a small company of 160 people 10 years ago, and 10 years after there were 1,600. And it was still organized like a family. It means it's not a big company with top-down processes and so on, because the talent of the people, because the knowledge and the engagement of the people is really important for them. So they say, okay, but that's a chaos. Now it has become a chaos. And to run the chaos, how could we do? We need our managers to develop their self-leadership so they can take initiative inside the chaos without waiting the family to take decisions. So we have developed some of the manager through self-leadership groups, through the self-leadership programs. But for me, it was important that not only developing the people, but developing the people and the organization. So we implemented the self-leadership program, which means group of 6 people, several groups of 6 people following the self-leadership journey for developing themselves. But beside of that, we have developed think tanks that were focusing on how can we live together in a so big company and exchanging information and knowledge and being efficient, and how can we stay close to our consumer now that they are much more than before. And what was interesting is that you had this kind of development that was self-development and organizational development, because the people were working for themselves. What do I want to develop in this environment which is growing but which is really complicated or complex? What's my goal? What's important for me? How can I be satisfied in that? And what do I want to achieve or to lead as projects? And on the other way, they've been working on should we do to better live together. And at the end, they have linked both, so that most of them have found a way to develop themselves in a way that can contribute to the company. So that was an example that has really helped people to develop themselves individually, but also to develop solutions for the company and also exchanges of practice. Another example in Tunisia. With a big retailer. It's called Magasin Général. Magasin Général is one of the 3 main retailers in Tunisia. And it was before the public retailer, and then after the revolution, it was bought by 2 families. And now they're facing challenges. One of the challenges is that there are 2 main competitors which are really focusing on turnover, earning money. And for them, they have another goal. They say, okay, for sure, we want to earn money, but that's not the only goal. We want to develop employment within Tunisia. We want to open much more stores in Tunisia, because if we support employment, then the country will develop itself, and then we have more chance not to fall in a new revolution. So they're really a corporate social responsibility in the way of thinking that they're growing. And they said, okay, if we do that, it's not just following rules on how to manage a store. It's also having our store leaders all around Tunisia to be able to make choices, to interact with the community, and so on. So they decided to follow the self-leadership module, and we're currently working with them, and about 120 people, from the top managers to the people within the store, will follow the self-leadership program. But this time too, I said, okay, if you want to work on this corporate social responsibility goal, you can't just work on the self-development of people, because you can't assume that they will be able to find a link between their needs and your needs. And so we've been working on the governance and the values. What are the values for the organization? What is really important behind this corporate social responsibility? And then what's the real wonder and the real magic in this adventure? I would say an adventure, because we're really learning together, is that they now develop a new ways of managing people that are not the US ways, that are not the European ways, that are the Tunisian Magasin Général ways of leading people that integrate efficiency, that integrate profitability, but that also integrate social responsibility. So that's really important. And what I learned personally from these two examples is that first, we've been working on individuals, but also on their environment. Second, in both cases, money was absolutely not the goal. Money is one constraint and one goal, possible goal, but it's much more a kind of social responsibility. And then third, these companies have accepted the complexity and didn't try to hide themselves in a kind of easy way of considering what business should be. And saying that, if you come back to all of you listening now, and I'm just sorry that we can't just interact with the 400 of you directly, but okay, at least you're listening. If you consider your needs for self-development, for self-leadership, I think these 3 points are the same. Develop yourself and work on yourself and develop what's important for you. Identify what are your main drivers, your main added value, so that you can contribute. But don't do it in a way that you're away from the reality. Do it in observing, trying, interacting with your reality, so that at the end you can make the two fitting together, the needs of the organization and your beneficiary and the environment and your needs, so that at the end you can fit together. Secondly, don't develop yourself, in 2 words, yourself, just for money or promotion. Okay, in a company like IOM, I think it's not the place where most of the people are just looking for money. You're not in a bank or in the finance industry, but okay, some of you are ambitious. It's good to be ambitious. I'm not saying you shouldn't be ambitious, but the way to develop yourself, don't just look for promotion. Just look for what's good for you and for your environment. And it's better to be satisfied in a job where you fully satisfy yourself and satisfy the environment than just to look for the next promotion. And then promotion will come, perhaps, but it's just a possible answer. It shouldn't be the goal. And last but not least, I think what I said about the groups and learn from the other, it's don't try to look for simple answer. We don't need complicated answer. That's not what I want to say. The world is complex enough. We don't need to have big complicated answers. But don't look for simple answer means accept complexity, accept that things change, that you would change, and that your answer from today will be perhaps another one tomorrow, and that you have perhaps several possible answers within you. When I see the careers of people on the long term, I should say that the most happy people have tried several things in their life. And when I say that, I'm not talking about employer. You can spend your whole life at IOM and try several things. But that's really important, because at each time you will try something new, you will face a new situation, face new experiences, and develop another part of yourself, but of yourself, not of someone else.
This is really interesting and great, Professor Geneve, and I'm glad you spoke about it, because there was a question, and now I guess we're getting into the last segment of our session, where we have questions from people. There is plenty of questions. So my colleagues all over the world, I'm excited.
You have to choose.
The topic is hit a chord with you, but also with time we're going to focus on the ones that maybe are more applicable to many people. So our colleague from the IOM office in the UK asked a question that I think you have answered in the last part, which is what would be the concrete steps to develop yourself as self-leadership. And I think the steps you mentioned just literally before this question, I hope is answering your question, Merdith, because he was, or the question was, is this something similar to self-care or different from self-care? And I think if you want to say something more on that, Geneve, on the difference between self-care and self-leadership.
Self-care is part of self-leadership, because if you really follow a self-leadership journey, which means identifying your real drivers, real goals, real contribution to the world and not the one you've been educated to have, then you're taking care of yourself. So, and self-care also means that you're indulgent to yourself. You accept that you're not a Superman. We all have expectations from our family, our parents, our friends sometimes, and our colleagues that we are Superman. None of us is a Superman. None of us. We all have moments where we are at the top and moments where we are at the bottom. So self-care for me is taking care of yourself. And so if you follow the self-leadership development journey, then you take care of yourself in accepting who you are and in focusing on your strengths. Because if you focus on your strengths, you are useful for the other and you have energy. If you waste your time on working on your weaknesses, then you don't bring a lot of added value and it costs you a lot of energy and sicknesses and so on. So in that sense, I would say it's not the same, probably not the same journey or the same methods that you will use for self-care and self-leadership, but at least they are close together in the spirit and the goal. Thank you for the question.
Thanks to you for the answer. And we have a question from our colleague in Panama. It's really about the concept that self-leadership also implies self-control and a process to learn how to be honest to ourselves on a daily basis in order to always be a better version of ourselves. The question is, to learn how to empower ourselves is a challenge.
Yeah.
Would there be any tips from your side on how to do that?
First, step by step. I really think we're all able to learn a lot of things, but if from the beginning, there are children, for example, that because of the story of the family or the family culture, they have to become someone really important in their life or someone who will be a politician or whatever. And a lot of these children won't succeed. And those who will succeed will do it through the powerful links of their family and not because of their own talent. So if you have such an ambition in front of you, it's completely different as developing yourself. Empowering yourself, it's giving you the power of doing things. So let's do things, but things, not huge ambitions. So I mean, it's really trying and step by step and reflecting on that. That's really important. So for me, it's don't stay just sitting on your seat. For clear, move. Excuse me, but move your ass. Excuse me for that. But don't try to change the world. And it's probably dangerous for you because you're really helping to save the world or to change the world. But for each of you, if you focus on the mission of yourself changing the world, how can you? So that's really, but you can change small things. You can help a family. You can do that and that. And it's the same for self-leadership and self-development. It's doing small things, trying, observing, learning from that, and then the step after. And learning from that is also having feedbacks and coaching and not you alone, so that you have interaction in between. So that's true. I think so. That's
absolutely, and I think we have few minutes in our broadcast, and I think you've answered a lot of the questions that I see coming, or they came during your presentation. The one that I'm going to ask you, and please excuse me for that request, is if you could kindly, in really a couple of sentences, define self-leadership in French, using French language, because we have a few of our colleagues who are in French-speaking Africa.
Yep.
Really loved the concept. Very curious. They chatted. They're writing in the chat a lot of comments and questions. But I'm seizing the opportunity of your language ability to, if you could just in a very brief few sentences for them. And I apologize if our colleagues in the Americas who speak Spanish, we may not do that. But next time when we have the speakers who speak, depending on the language, I'll try to accommodate at the end a small portion for just recapping on that language so that we don't leave people behind. So take that as a promise from me. I saw your comments in the chat and very well noted. So sorry again for throwing that back at you, Professor Geneva.
That's not a problem. If you would have asked that for your colleague from Panama, I could have tried in Spanish, but I can't. I know enough Spanish to interact in vacations. Answering about self-leadership. So sorry, Mr. from Panama. So now back to French. Okay. Ok, donc bonjour nos collègues francophones. Donc oui, je pense il y a un mot que nous mettons autour de cette notion de self-leadership, c'est prendre sa place et toute sa place. C'est vrai que celui-là, j'ai jamais traduit en anglais réellement parce qu'il y a comme vous le savez, il y a des locutions qui sont valables dans un langage et qui se traduisent très difficilement. Mais prendre sa place et toute sa place, c'est-à-dire finalement, dans un monde où personne ne vous dit quelle est votre place, où on essaye parfois de vous donner des places qui arrangent les gens, mais qui ne sont pas forcément la place qui vous convient, c'est finalement identifier c'est quoi votre place, c'est quoi votre contribution, c'est quoi votre valeur ajoutée, mais prendre toute sa place, c'est-à-dire que c'est pas juste remplir un rôle. Remplir un rôle, on s'assèche à remplir juste un rôle, et on n'a plus à un moment donné assez d'énergie pour ça. Ça va pour un acteur, il fait 1 heure ou 2 heures on stage le soir, hein, et puis il rejoue le lendemain, mais entre-temps, il joue plus. Donc nous, dans notre job, on est tout le temps sous le feu des projecteurs. Et donc, prendre toute sa place, ça veut dire aussi prendre cette place avec toute sa personnalité, toutes ses envies, tous ses rêves aussi. Et c'est pour ça que je disais aussi en anglais tout à l'heure, c'est aussi une démarche qui n'exclut pas la réflexion sur l'évolution personnelle. On ne peut plus évoluer professionnellement sans évoluer aussi personnellement. On n'est pas le même à la maison qu'au travail, évidemment, mais nos valeurs, elles sont les mêmes si on veut être performant. Donc voilà, je ne sais pas, Ismaël, si tu veux que j'aille plus loin, mais en quelques mots, des choses que je pourrais dire sur self-leadership qui sont avec des mots aussi spécifiques aux Français, hein, puisque ici on a le programme à Genève, on a le programme aussi bien en français qu'en anglais, bien sûr. Quand même, à Genève, on fait aussi du français. Donc voilà, je ne sais pas si tu veux que j'aille plus loin, et si oui, oriente sur quels sont les points peut-être qui seraient intéressants pour nos auditeurs.
Thank you. Merci, professeur Genève. Et j'espère que cela répond à votre demande. We, as we said, we're going to try to do, depending on who's our guest speaker and the language they're able to speak, I'll try to accommodate at the end a summary in that language. So much appreciated, Professor Genève. And on my side, I'd like to thank all of our colleagues. We're coming at the end of this session, for being active. I see a lot of questions. Actually, one of the very active sessions. I spent time watching my cell phone throughout the last segment of the session. So a lot of questions. I promise that in case it's a specific case, I'll come back to you after the stream, and I'll be in touch with Professor Genève if there is any references or material available.
Yeah, sure.
Shared. So we'll have this dialogue happening. As Professor Genève mentioned, he's in Geneva, we're in Geneva. We have already some collaboration at different levels. So we'll try to build that on more. And if you accept, Professor Genève, this should be maybe the beginning of an ongoing collaboration.
It's a pleasure, because it was really, thank you for all of you to have listened, because it's interactive in a way, because you can ask questions, but it's not a direct interaction. That's good, because you can be numerous, but that's not personal. And I think that was the first experience for me. I did follow some webinars from my colleagues here, but it was not the first experience, and I loved it. But now I'm hungry to have more and to know what you've been writing. For example, I expect that from you, Ismaël, if you agree, to have the list of questions, because it will inspire me also for what's important to precise, to explain, and so on. And for sure, if then there is an interest. You notice that a lot of people are interested in the topic. We can really see how we could help yourself, for sure. The university is here for helping, like you. Not the same thing. We are not the same doing for the same people, but we're here for helping too. So with pleasure.
Thank you very much. To your time, I know you've been very busy. You just came from Japan, literally within the week. So I hope that you're not too jet lagged. Thanks to all of our colleagues, especially to our colleagues from Asia Pacific. I saw people from Pakistan, from different areas, who are doing it from home using their smartphone. Hopefully, you saw some value in listening to this broadcast. To our colleagues in the Americas, have a lovely continuation of your day. To our colleagues here in Europe, Africa, Middle East, have a good end of your day, and we'll summarize, recap from the session. We will make a recording link for those who didn't or couldn't have a chance to attend live, and we'll send it to you by email. So thank you, everybody, and have a lovely end of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.